He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten me. He didn't even look angry. He just slid a check across the desk and told me to disappear from his daughter's life. $200,000. To erase myself. What he didn't know was that the entire life he was protecting, the company, the status, the respect in that room, only existed because of me. And before you think this is a revenge story or a billionaire fantasy, let me stop you. This story isn't loud. It doesn't explode. It tightens. And when it finally snaps, it changes everything between a father, a daughter, and a man she almost married. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever been dismissed, talked down to, or quietly tested by people who thought you were small, hit like, subscribe, and stay with this story. Because this isn't about money. It's about power, respect, and what happens when silence finally speaks. Now, listen closely. People always assume struggle looks dramatic, that it comes with panic attacks, overdue notices, late-night breakdowns, and desperation. Mine didn't. Mine looked fine. For 8 years, I designed websites. Not startups chasing unicorn valuations. Not flashy apps with launch parties. Localdines. Family-owned shops. Plumbers. Landscapers. Small businesses trying to look a little bigger than they were. I worked alone. No office. No team. No investors breathing down my neck. I invoiced. I waited to get paid. Some months were great. Some months were thin. But I never missed rent. My 12-year-old Toyota still started every morning like it respected me. My apartment sat in the older part of town. Thin walls, creaky floors, quiet nights. Clean space. Clear head. I slept just fine. People saw a freelancer getting by. I let them. There's a certain freedom in being underestimated. You move through rooms unnoticed. You hear things people don't think you're important enough to hear. The conference smelled like money and insecurity. Polished shoes on concrete floors. Branded hoodies pretending to be casual. Confidence stretched just thin enough to tear. I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd gone on a discounted pass. Sat in the back. Skipped the networking. But that night at the hotel bar, a man sat next to me and started talking. Not introducing himself. Not pitching. Just talking. Loud. Loose. Halfway drunk on bad whiskey and panic. His name was Richard Collins. He ran a cloud security startup. On paper, it should have worked. In reality, it was bleeding cash. Investors restless. Clients leaving. Burn rate climbing faster than revenue. He wasn't asking for help. He was unloading because strangers don't judge. I listened. That's my habit. Asked a few questions. Quiet ones. The kind that don't sound threatening. How long until the next funding round? What churn looked like? Who actually understood the product? He answered without realizing what he was revealing. Before we parted, I handed him my card. No pitch. No promise. Just my name. 2 weeks later, my phone rang at midnight. He had 60 days. 60 days before everything collapsed that I reviewed everything. The numbers. The product. The positioning. The idea was solid. The execution was a mess. I made him an offer that sounded insane to anyone who didn't understand leverage. I would rebuild the company, keep it alive, restructure everything. But I wanted 40% ownership and total anonymity. No board seat, no spotlight, no interviews, no questions. I didn't want credit. I wanted control. He agreed. Fast. Desperation does that. 18 months later, the company had tripled its revenue. Signed contracts with corporations people brag about at dinner parties. Richard Collins became a minor legend. Panels, articles, podcasts. No one ever asked how. And I didn't volunteer, and that's how everything began. 6 months after that, I met his daughter. It wasn't planned. Backyard barbecue. Mutual friends. Paper plates. Warm beer. Her name was Lauren. She was sharp, funny, unimpressed by money, and refreshingly uninterested in startup nonsense, despite growing up surrounded by it. We talked for hours. Terrible movies. Late breakfasts. Why ambition without purpose feels hollow. I told her I designed websites. That was it. She didn't ask for more. Our relationship grew without performance. No selling. No posturing. When I proposed, it felt steady. Not dramatic. Just right. The party was her parents' idea. They rented a private room at a restaurant where prices aren't listed. I wore my best shirt. Everyone else wore confidence tailored by money. Lauren's mother introduced me as the fiancé who works with computers. Her brother kept asking about my long-term plans. Richard's business friends smiled politely, then drifted away toward people they considered relevant. Lauren stayed close, apologizing for things she didn't cause. 2 hours in, Richard approached me. Practice smile. Glass of scotch. Can we talk privately? Lauren squeezed my hand. Dad, can it wait? Business, he said, already turning away. The office was quiet. Polished desk. Soft lighting. Richard didn't sit. Neither did I. You seem like a decent guy, he said calmly. But my daughter's used to a certain level of stability. He glanced at my jacket. Freelancing is unpredictable. Old cars. Rentals. Then he made his move. I'll write you a check for $200,000. You walk away clean. Tell her whatever you need to. He said it like ordering coffee. I didn't react. I just looked at him. The man whose company I'd saved. Who had no idea he was standing in front of the person who owned nearly half his world. He thought he was buying me out. He had no idea what he'd just done. I stayed in that office for a full minute after he left, staring at the faint ring his glass left on the desk. A perfect circle, temporary, easily wiped away. That's how he thought this worked. Erase the problem. Move on. I stepped back into the party with a calm smile. Lauren spotted me instantly. Everything okay? I pulled her close. Just business. She relaxed. Trusted me. That trust weighed more than the check ever could. That night, my apartment felt different. Sharper. I opened my laptop. Pulled up files I hadn't touched in months. Contracts. Transfers. Decisions. 3 years of proof. The valuation sat on the screen. Cold. Precise. 40%. The next morning, I rode an elevator downtown with a man named Daniel Price. Corporate attorney. Mid-50s. The kind of calm that comes from knowing where bodies are buried. You look like someone made a mistake, he said. I told him everything. No emotion. Just facts. He listened, then made 2 calls. You'll be attending the next board review, he said. As a guest consultant. I nodded. That was enough. That evening, I met Lauren in a park. Neutral ground. I told her what her father had done. The color drained from her face. She didn't laugh. Didn't deny it. She called him. I listened as his words fell apart. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. I'm so sorry, she said. I didn't know he could do that. I held her, then asked quietly, when it comes down to it, where do you stand? She hesitated. Just enough. He's my father, she said. What he did was wrong. She didn't say more. And something shifted. Not broken. Shifted. There's a specific kind of silence that settles after a question goes unanswered. It isn't loud. It doesn't accuse. It just waits. Lauren's words, he's my father, hung between us longer than she realized. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't finished either. And that incompleteness changed the shape of everything. The days after the park conversation felt strangely normal on the surface. Texts about dinner, work schedules, weekend plans that didn't quite land. But underneath, every interaction carried weight. Not anger, uncertainty. I watched Lauren carefully, not for betrayal, but for clarity. It never fully arrived. She was kind, affectionate, still saying, I love you. But something subtle had shifted in her posture. Her pauses were longer. Her reassurances softer, like someone holding a door halfway open, unsure whether to step through or close it. Midweek, she called. Dad wants to apologize, she said. Dinner tomorrow? I said yes. Not because I wanted to hear him speak, but because avoidance would have been easier, and easy things rarely lead anywhere honest. The next morning, I dressed differently. Not to impress. To be accurate. A suit I rarely wore. Tailored. Quietly expensive. A watch I'd never worn around Lauren. Not flashy. Just intentional. When I walked into Richard Collins' office building that afternoon, heads turned. Not because they recognized me. Because confidence recognizes its own. I didn't smile. I didn't rush. Inside the elevator, mirrors reflected something people hadn't expected from me. And for the first time, I wondered whether Lauren would recognize this version or resent it. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and unquestioned authority. I took a seat near the end of the table. Hands folded. Posture relaxed. Richard stood at the head, commanding attention out of habit. He still hadn't asked why I was there. He assumed someone else had invited me. That assumption would cost him more than he understood. The presentation began. Slides of decline, then recovery, then growth. Each chart told a story Richard had been repeating for years. I watched his face as the details deepened. Strategic pivots, staffing changes, capital injections, moves timed so precisely they bordered on surgical. These weren't accidents. When the floor opened for commentary, Daniel Price spoke. Calm, exact. He referenced agreements Richard had signed years earlier, when desperation made him agreeable. The screen changed. Signatures, dates, percentages. Richard finally looked at me. Confusion flickered, then irritation, then something closer to unease. I stood, introduced myself formally. As a private stakeholder. Silence spread, not shock. Processing comes first. Richard laughed once. Dismissive. That's not possible, he said. You're a freelance web designer. Yes, I replied. And I'm also the reason this company survived. The document spoke for me. Richard sat down without realizing he'd done it. The man who never sat first suddenly needed the chair. The meeting ended quietly. No applause. No arguments. Just recalibration. I left before questions could form. Power doesn't linger. It moves. The restaurant was the same one Richard had chosen. Same private room. Same polished table. Lauren arrived first. Nervous energy barely contained. She thanked me for coming. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice yet. Richard arrived late. He looked smaller. Not physically. Internally. Like someone who had discovered the rules weren't universal. He began with an apology. Careful. Measured. Lauren listened with her arms crossed. Her eyes searched for sincerity. I waited. When he finished, I asked one question. Did you mean any of it? He hesitated. That was answer enough. Lauren turned to me. Dad says there was a meeting today, she said. Why were you there? I told her the truth. Not everything. Just enough. Her face changed in layers. Shocked. Hurt. Understanding. Then something heavier. She looked at her father, not as a protector, but as a man shaped by fear. Dinner passed in fragments. Food untouched. Sentences abandoned. Outside, Lauren walked a few steps ahead of me. Not away, just ahead. I need time, she said quietly. I nodded. That was fair that we spoke less after that. Not because of anger, because silence was doing important work. I returned to my routines. Client calls, deadlines, invoices, small problems with clear solutions. The simplicity grounded me. One afternoon, Daniel called. Everything's stable, he said. No fallout. Good. That night, Lauren texted. Can we talk? I stared at the message longer than necessary. Some conversations change trajectories. You don't rush those. When she arrived, she looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. We sat across from each other. The space between us suddenly loud. I've been thinking about who I am, she said, and who I've been trying to be. She talked about growing up surrounded by certainty that wasn't hers. About confusing comfort with values. About approval masquerading as love. I didn't interrupt. This wasn't about being right. When she finished, she asked, Do you think people can change? I answered carefully. I think they can, I said, but only when they stop negotiating with themselves. She nodded, as if that confirmed something she already knew. 2 nights later, Richard called. No greeting. Just my name. He asked if we could talk. Neutral ground. A quiet cafe by the river. He arrived early. That alone told me everything. I didn't know, he said. Not an excuse. A statement. You didn't ask, I replied. He admitted it was easier to pay a problem away than face being wrong. I raised my daughter to be strong, he said, and then I tried to choose for her. That admission cost him something. I could see it. When we parted, nothing was resolved. Some things shouldn't be rushed toward comfort. Lauren came by 3 days later. No warning, just a knock at sunset. I needed to see you where you live, she said. She looked around slowly, not judging, observing. The couch, the books, the quiet order. I thought security meant never being afraid, she said. But I've been afraid my whole life. She talked about conversations with her mother, about stories she'd never heard, about struggle, about values forged before comfort softened them. And then there's you, she said. You didn't need approval. You just stood where you were. That wasn't strategy, she added. It was survival, I said. She smiled faintly. That's what scares me. I love you, she said. But love isn't readiness. My chest tightened. My thoughts stayed clear. I don't want to be someone you grow into, I said. I want to be someone you choose without hesitation. She looked down, then back up. I can't promise that. We didn't argue. She left the ring on the table. Not dramatically, gently, like returning something borrowed. After she left, the apartment was quiet. Not empty, honest. The next week passed without ceremony. Richard sent a message acknowledging boundaries. Professional, respectful. I walked along the river one evening, watched lights fracture across water, thought about how many people mistake visibility for value, how often the strongest decisions are made quietly, and how integrity rarely announces itself.